Well, thanks for joining this special edition of Salmon Matter, a co-production of the Pacific Salmon Foundation and Conversations That Matter. Of course, this is a unique time. We are still working in the world of response to coronavirus. So all of us at the Pacific Salmon Foundation are working remotely, but still working with our friends at Conversation That Matter. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by one of my colleagues, Samantha James. She's a biologist with the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and she is working on a research program studying salmon hatcheries and their effectiveness and how we can improve their effectiveness for the good of wild salmon conservation in the future. Samantha, welcome to Salmon Matter.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Great. So, Sam, let's get started. You're fairly new at the Pacific Salmon Foundation, but you're passionate about salmon. You've been in the salmon world for and interested in salmon for a long time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in salmon.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up on the North Shore, and so salmon have been a big part of my life since I was a kid. And, we had the Stream of Dreams and the salmon in the classroom program and painting salmon next to storm drains, all of those things. So definitely grown up with an appreciation for salmon. And it wasn't until many years later, though, when I finished my bachelor's degree at UBC and found myself as a research assistant for someone doing research up in Rivers Inlet on the Central Coast, that I really fell in love with salmon and realized what a fundamental part of life in BC they are. And so it was up there in Rivers Inlet that I decided I was going to pursue a master's at UBC, and I studied juvenile salmon there. And it was there that I actually met Isabel Pearsall, who's our coordinator for the Salish Sea Survival Program, and was really impressed with her and the work that she's been doing for the Pacific Salmon Foundation, coordinating some really important work throughout the Salish Sea. And it was from there that I decided that was the type of work that I wanted to do for salmon to really make a difference. So when I was finishing my master's was last summer, and that was the same time that the Pacific Salmon Foundation received funding to do this hatchery review. And so I leapt in to get involved. It was a great opportunity for me to continue to do salmon research in a way that I felt would have the greatest impact for salmon. And working for the Pacific Salmon Foundation was the dream job. So I'm really happy to be here and to be a part of the team.
Well, we're happy to have you. And it's cool to hear about your connection through schools with Stream of Dreams, Salmon in the Classroom, because that's, of course, a program that our community salmon program funds for many years with the support of the Salmon Conservation Stamp and our many donors. So nice to see that linkage through your life, and now that you're working with PSF. So, Sam, help us understand, what is a salmon hatchery? How do they operate? How many of them are there? Give us some context about salmon hatcheries in British Columbia.
So salmon hatcheries are facilities that are designed to support and augment wild populations of salmon. So they're built on rivers where they can collect salmon as they're returning to the rivers to spawn as adults, and they collect eggs from the females and milk from the males, and they're able to incubate the eggs and rear the young in a facility with the goal of increasing survival in that freshwater life stage. The fish are then released into the river, and they live out the rest of their lives as they would in the ocean before they come back to those rivers to spawn again. So the hope for hatcheries is that they're able to increase survival and have more fish coming back to the rivers. So they can have a few different objectives. You have hatcheries for conservation, some are supporting fisheries. There's actually a huge number in BC. I think we have about 170 hatcheries. Of these, about 23 are major Fisheries and Oceans Canada facilities, but many of them are community hatcheries, and we have several small-scale volunteer-run facilities that are also doing some really amazing work. We have all species of salmon being reared in these facilities, pink, chum, sockeye, all of them. And then hatcheries aren't just unique to Canada. I should say that as well. So we release fish here in BC, but there's fish also being released from all countries around the North Pacific. So from the US, Russia, Korea, Japan as well.
Okay, great. And again, the linkage to the community salmon program, many of these community hatcheries, the Pacific Salmon Foundation has been supporting as well through the years. And these are locations for lots of volunteer activity in the communities, bringing school groups out to learn about the salmon life cycle. Mm-hmm. So I think it's wonderful that you have a chance to be influencing both the big facilities that DFO runs, but also our community hatcheries. So give us a sense. Thank you for that context. Give us a sense, Sam, of the significance of hatcheries relative to, what's going on with the state of salmon and the larger environmental issues. We hear a lot about orca whales, and we certainly know about the declines in some of our salmon stocks, Chinook and sockeye and the Fraser, of course. So give us a sense of, what are the key issues relative to the significance of hatcheries?
Right. Well, yes, the salmon story is one that we're hearing a lot more about these days. And as you mentioned, there's issues around killer whales, restrictions for fisheries, enclosures. There's been growing concerns really since the population started to decline in the early 90s. And we haven't seen them recover. And there's a lot of uncertainty as to what's driving those declines. But with fishing restrictions and concerns about trophic interactions, relationships between predators and prey in the ecosystem, like you mentioned, killer whales, or even how this is going to change as oceans are warming, the opportunity for enhancement facilities to support fisheries and potentially conserve stocks that are at risk is really, really important.
So it's a critical issue in that complicated biodiversity web that the salmon are at the center of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Let's get into a little bit more on the particular project that you're working on and what you're doing. Tell folks that are watching, what was the impetus for the Salmon Foundation starting this hatchery effectiveness program that you're involved with?
Well, so the Pacific Salmon Foundation has been involved in work through the Salish Sea Marine Survival Program. And as part of that program, they were looking at they did a hatchery study on the Cowichan system, looking at survival rates of wild versus hatchery fish. And what they found was that the hatchery fish were having consistently lower survival than wild salmon. And so this was just one of many studies that were done through the Salish Sea Marine Survival Program. But as a result, they felt that there was a need to learn more about why is this? Why is hatchery survival so much lower? What could we be doing to see better results and improve performance of hatchery fish?
Okay, that's good. Help people understand quickly, how do you measure survival? What does that mean?
How do you measure survival? So for the hatchery fish specifically, they're looking at the number of fish that they're putting out versus the number of fish that are coming back, being caught in fisheries, but also coming back to the rivers and to the facilities. There are many more complicated ways of calculating survival, but that's just sort of the snapshot to get at the success of those releases that they're putting out.
And this, of course, is one of the challenges of studying salmon is there are many different species. They each have different life cycles in terms of how long their life cycle is. So all of this takes a long period of time to do. It's not just done in a summer. It takes years, and we're in the midst of that.
Yes. Yeah, so for coho, they go out and they'll typically spend 1 or 2 years in the ocean. They'll come back usually as 3-year-olds, whereas for Chinook, as you were saying, they can come back as 3, 4, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds even, very rarely. So it's a bit more complicated as you look at many different species.
Yeah, and part of the way we're able to do this better is through technological advances, tagging fish. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Well, so as I was mentioning in the Cowichan study that the the Salish Sea Marine Survival Program was doing, they were able to use pit tags to track fish and track their movements and survival. And so pit tags are really small electronic tags that you can insert into a fish, which then allow us to track their movements, and they can be detected as they swim past sensors. And so using these sorts of technology, we've really been able to learn a lot more about fish movements and survival.
Good, thank you. And this is where I have to make a plug and a thank you for all of our donors, Samantha, because we've been doing a lot more research using pit tags and technology that even 10 years ago just wasn't available, and it's our donors that have been able to support that. So Sam, let's talk a bit now about particularly what you're doing within the hatchery effectiveness review.
Yeah, okay. So this project, again, was initiated last summer when the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund announced $142 million in funding for projects that focused on innovation, infrastructure, as well as science partnerships across industries that would further the long-term sustainability of salmon. And so the Pacific Salmon Foundation had put together a hatchery effectiveness review proposal, and it was one of the first to be approved last summer. So the project itself is made up of 3 components. There is a review of molecular tools that's being done by Amy Lee Hood, who works for Environmental Dynamics Inc. in Nanaimo. And her report will actually be coming out sometime this summer. So we have that to look forward to. The second component is the piece that I'm working on, and I'll tell you a bit more about. It's reviewing release strategies used by hatcheries. And then we'll have an overarching third element that looks at hatchery effectiveness in BC generally. And so my piece looking at release strategies also has 2 different elements. I'll be doing a literature review to see what work has already been done, what do we know, and then looking at the practices and release strategies used in facilities in British Columbia. So when I'm referring to release strategies, I should just clarify that I'm referring to, how big is a fish when it's released from a hatchery? What day of the year do you release it? Are we releasing fry or smolts or yearlings? At what life stage are they? These sorts of things. And so that requires working really closely with the federal government's Salmon Matter enhancement program and looking at how effective have these different strategies been. There are standards for all of these things, time and size at release, but with these declines that we've been talking about, some facilities have started to experiment. Can things be tweaked or changed in a way to improve the numbers of fish we're seeing coming back? And so my hope is that I can take a sort of a deeper look at some of the work that they've been doing and determine what's been most effective where. We have a lot of data that they've us with, and we're really lucky to have a contracted Landmark Fisheries Research to do some of these analyses for us, to look at the effects of these release strategies on things like survival or the age of the fish that we see in catch and coming back to the facilities.
Great. Now, when you talk about this literature review, Sam, and I can't remember if you referenced it earlier, you did. We're not the only country that's producing Pacific salmon through hatcheries. This is something that goes on all around the Pacific Rim. In fact, we're in Canada a relatively small percentage of the overall fish that are going out into the Pacific. Does this literature review include a global context? Are we looking at hatcheries in other countries to understand, maybe one country's doing it better than others and we can learn from them?
At the moment, I'm just considering releases from the sort of BC as well as the coast of US, so Oregon, Washington, and California, as well as Alaska. While we can learn from how they are running their hatcheries as well, there are so many ecological differences in those systems along the coast that what's working in Alaska might not be working for facilities in the Strait of Georgia. So we kind of wanted to keep it broad, but also somewhat narrow so that what we're learning from this review could be applicable to us here in BC.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that detail, Sam. So just to kind of wrap it up, in a nutshell, if you're just learning about this study, watching this for the first time and learning about this study, just in a nutshell, why do you think this work that you're doing and that we're doing at PSF is going to be good for Pacific salmon and their conservation in the future?
Well, Mike, I'm sure you've heard salmon referred to as the lifeblood, keystone species. I mean, they're so important to people in British Columbia and really throughout the Pacific Northwest, to people's cultures, to the ecosystems, and to our economies. A lot of people, for a lot of people, salmon is a way of life. And so the fact that they've been in decline for several decades now, it's really important that we try and understand what's going on and what we can do, what's actually in our power to do to improve things for Pacific salmon. And so salmon enhancement is just one tool that we can use to support wild salmon. And they currently are putting out about 300 million fish every year, 300 million salmon. And there's a lot of investment going into those fish that are going out. And we want to make sure that we actually take the time to stop and ask these questions of how effective is enhancement in BC? Are we reaching our objectives? Is there anything else we could be doing differently? What have we learned so far? And how can we adapt what we're doing based on what we've learned to make sure that we're moving forward responsibly and with the best science at our fingertips? So this is an amazing opportunity to work together and to really learn what's been done and develop best practices moving forward. And to date, there has not been a review of hatchery effectiveness to this scale. So it's really exciting to start seeing the data come together. And it's a really incredible opportunity to learn and to optimize hatcheries and increase their effectiveness.
Yeah, that word adapt that you used is a very powerful and prescient one these days. It's certainly in this context with climate change, something that has to be considered, but we also know in the context of this coronavirus that we're dealing with that adapting is critical. Give us a sense, Sam, how are you in your work with this project adapting in this context we are in with coronavirus? Is the project continuing in earnest? Are there things that aren't happening? What's happening and what's not happening, I guess?
Yes, well, fortunately, there's a lot happening for this project. We are in a position where we can be working remotely and doing our data analyses and still communicating with hatcheries, although ideally, we'd like to be going out to these hatcheries in person, and we were able to visit some hatcheries before the shutdown, but unfortunately, we can't do those visits anymore. I'm hoping that once their busy season passes, which right now they're busy with tagging and getting ready for releasing in the spring. Once that passes, we'll be able to continue these conversations with hatchery managers. But in the meantime, we're busy, crunch and hard at work. So keeping busy.
That's great to hear. Sam, anything I missed? Anything else you want to say about the work that you're doing and the project?
I'd just say, if people are interested in learning more about the project, or, if they have any suggestions, definitely get in touch with Pacific Salmon Foundation. We're very happy to talk about it and to collaborate with different groups. So, happy to share what we're doing and very much looking forward to sharing the results from this work a year from now. So thank you.
Well, Sam, thank you very much. And we have to acknowledge as well all of our donors and supporters that make this project possible. You mentioned the BC Salmon Restoration Innovation Fund. That's a big investment from the province of British Columbia and the federal government that is supporting good research projects like yours, also habitat restoration projects that are going on. And I appreciate you mentioning salmon as the lifeblood species, because we have made the commitment to look at everything from an ecosystem-based perspective, and there are so many levers that we have to push and pull for the good of salmon: habitat, water, in the context of climate change, and then the hatcheries program that we've invested so much in Canada over the many years that we've been doing this. So thanks for tying all of this up for us, and we'll look forward to hearing more about results in the future. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we'll wrap up this edition of Salmon Matter. And again, thank you very much, Samantha James, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, great. And for those of you out there watching, stay tuned. We'll have more of these special editions of Salmon Matter coming at you in the weeks to come. Until then, thank you for watching.